On Christmas Eve, 1895, in the mountains of North Carolina, the largest private home ever built in America opened its doors for the first time. Biltmore, 250 rooms, 43 bathrooms, 65 fireplaces, 4 acres of floor space beneath a single roof. George Vanderbilt had spent 6 years and $5 million, nearly $200 million in today's money, creating his vision of a perfect retreat, a castle in the clouds where he could pursue his passions for literature, art, and horticulture, far from the noise of New York society. But George Vanderbilt would enjoy his palace for less than 20 years. His widow would spend the rest of her life conversing with his ghost in the library. Their only daughter would abandon it all, dye her hair bright pink, and never return. And visitors to this day report hearing phantom parties echoing through the empty halls, the sound of splashing from a pool that was drained decades ago, whispers of a name, George, George. This is the story of Biltmore, America's largest home, a monument to Gilded Age excess, and a house where some say the dead refuse to leave. George Washington Vanderbilt II was born into American aristocracy in 1862. His grandfather, Cornelius the Commodore Vanderbilt, had built an empire on shipping and railroads, amassing one of the greatest fortunes in American history. But George was different from his siblings. While his older brothers bulldozed their way through business deals and social climbing, George retreated into books. He became fluent in 8 languages. He collected rare manuscripts. He traveled Europe studying art and architecture. He was shy, thoughtful, a scholar in a family of titans. In 1888, at age 26, George accompanied his mother on a trip to Asheville, North Carolina. His mother had been visiting the mountain resort town for her health, and the doctors insisted the climate would do her good. George fell in love, not with a woman, with the mountains, with the clean mountain air, with the endless vistas of the Blue Ridge, with the possibility of creating something entirely his own, far from the shadow of his famous name. He began buying land, first a few hundred acres, then a few thousand, parcel by parcel, farm by farm. He assembled an empire of 125,000 acres, nearly 200 square miles of pristine North Carolina wilderness. His vision was audacious, to build not just a house, but a completely self-sustaining estate. A working farm, managed forests, scientific agriculture, a model of conservation and land stewardship, and at its heart, a chateau worthy of the Loire Valley. He hired the best. Richard Morris Hunt, the first American to study at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, architect of the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty and mansions for the Astors and Morgans. Frederick Law Olmsted, who had designed Central Park in New York City and was considered the father of American landscape architecture. Hunt's instructions were simple: design a French Renaissance chateau, but make it feel at home in the mountains. Construction began in 1889. 1,000 workers labored for 6 years. A brick factory was built on site, a woodworking shop, a 3-mile railroad spur to haul materials. 60 stonemasons carved Indiana limestone into arches and columns and gargoyles. The house that emerged was beyond anything America had ever seen. A steeply pitched roof crowned with 16 chimneys, massive limestone facades, towers and turrets, a porte-cochere to shelter arriving carriages, and inside, a banquet hall with a 70-foot ceiling, a library with 10,000 books in 8 languages, a winter garden with a retractable glass ceiling, an indoor swimming pool holding 70,000 gallons, a bowling alley, a gymnasium, hidden passages and secret doors woven through the walls. The entrance hall alone was a statement. Massive white marble columns soared 30 feet high. A double staircase curved upward in perfect symmetry, and everywhere the family crest, acorns and oak leaves, symbols of strength and growth, carved into wood, pressed into plaster, embossed on copper. On Christmas Eve, 1895, George welcomed his first guests. The house was not yet finished. Work would continue for years, but it was magnificent, lit by some of Thomas Edison's first electric light bulbs, heated by a central steam system, equipped with elevators and telephones and call buttons for servants. Biltmore was as technologically advanced as any building in the world. It was George Vanderbilt's masterpiece, but it was also desperately lonely. In 1898, at age 36, George finally married. Her name was Edith Stuyvesant Dresser. She was 25, descended from Peter Stuyvesant, the first governor of Dutch colonial New York. They met in Paris, fell in love, and married there in June. By all accounts, it was a genuine love match. Edith was intelligent, cultured, and independent-minded. She shared George's love of art and literature. She was unimpressed by the gaudy displays of wealth that defined Gilded Age society, and she loved Biltmore as much as George did. After their honeymoon in Italy, they returned to live at the estate. George had finally found his companion, the person who would share his dream. On August 22, 1900, in the Louis XV bedroom on the second floor, Edith gave birth to their only child, a daughter. They named her Cornelia Stuyvesant Vanderbilt. The Spartanburg Journal wrote, "A new star has appeared at famous Biltmore, and the charming mistress of this most gorgeous home is smiling upon her firstborn." For 14 years, the Vanderbilts lived what seemed to be an idyllic life. George managed his forests with the help of a young forester named Gifford Pinchot, who would go on to become the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service. The estate became the birthplace of American forestry, the first professionally managed forest in the country. They opened the Biltmore Forest School in 1898, training the first generation of American foresters. Over 15 years, more than 300 students passed through its doors. George and Edith entertained guests from around the world. Authors like Edith Wharton and Henry James, diplomats and ambassadors, even presidents. They held weekly musicales in the music room with professional opera singers including Enrico Caruso. They hosted elaborate dinners. They walked the gardens that Olmsted had designed. Formal gardens, a rose garden, an azalea garden, a walled English garden. Biltmore was everything George had dreamed. And then, in March 1914, it all ended. George was in Washington, D.C. on business when he felt severe abdominal pain, appendicitis. The doctors rushed him into emergency surgery. Complications set in. Infection. On March 6, 1914, George Washington Vanderbilt II died. He was 51 years old. His body was returned to Biltmore, then taken to the family mausoleum on Staten Island. The estate he had spent his adult life creating was left to his widow and his 13-year-old daughter. Edith was devastated. She had been married to George for barely 16 years. Cornelia had lost her father just as she was becoming a young woman. The life they had known at Biltmore was over. After George's death, Edith tried to carry on. She managed the estate. She sold 86,700 acres to the federal government for less than $5 an acre, creating what would become Pisgah National Forest. It was what George would have wanted, the land preserved forever. She split her time between Biltmore and Washington, D.C., where Cornelia attended a private girls' school. But something strange began to happen. Servants noticed that Edith spent hours in the library, George's library, the two-story room with its 10,000 books and spiral staircase and concealed passageways, the room where George had spent countless hours reading during storms, so absorbed in his books that Edith would have to come fetch him for parties. And in the library, Edith talked to George. At first, the servants thought it was grief, a widow speaking to the memory of her husband, but the conversations continued, day after day, month after month, year after year. She spoke to him as if he were there, as if he could hear her, as if he answered back. And then the servants began to experience something themselves. They heard footsteps in the library when it was empty. They saw a shadowy figure sitting in George's favorite chair by the fireplace. They heard the whisper of his name, George, as if Edith were calling to him from beyond. Some claimed they smelled cigar smoke, though smoking had long been prohibited in the house. The library wasn't the only place. Staff working late reported hearing the sounds of a party in the great halls, laughter, glasses clinking, music drifting from the ballroom. But when they investigated, the rooms were empty. In the basement near the indoor swimming pool, there were sounds of splashing, children's laughter echoing from the drain. But the pool had been emptied years earlier. Footsteps on the grand staircase, shadows moving through the corridors, cold spots in certain rooms, the sensation of being watched. Some believed it was George, unable to leave the home he loved. Others whispered about a woman in pink, allegedly George's mistress, who died in a nearby hospital in 1898. There were rumors of a child who drowned in the pool, though no records confirm this. The house, it seemed, was haunted. Whether Edith believed George's spirit truly lingered or whether she found comfort in the illusion, no one knows. But she continued her conversations with him until her own death in 1958. After Edith died, servants reported hearing two voices in the library. George and Edith reunited in death, continuing the conversations they had begun in life. To this day, visitors and staff report hearing whispers, seeing shadows, feeling presences in rooms that should be empty. Biltmore officially does not acknowledge paranormal activity. When asked about ghosts, they will only discuss the spirits of the wine produced at the estate's winery. But the stories persist. In 1924, 10 years after her father's death, Cornelia Vanderbilt married. Her groom was the Honorable John Francis Amherst Cecil, a British diplomat and descendant of Lord Burghley, who had been High Treasurer to Queen Elizabeth I. The wedding took place at All Souls Cathedral in Biltmore Village. 500 guests attended the ceremony. Another 2,500 came to the reception at Biltmore House. It was the society event of the year. Cornelia, now 24, had inherited $50 million from her father, equivalent to over $800 million today. She was one of the wealthiest women in America. The couple settled at Biltmore. In 1925, their first son, George Henry Vanderbilt Cecil, was born in the same Louis XV bedroom where Cornelia herself had been born. 3 years later, in 1928, their second son, William Amherst Vanderbilt Cecil, arrived, also in that same room. 3 generations born in the same bedroom of America's largest house. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, the Cecils faced a crisis. Biltmore was hemorrhaging money. The cost of maintaining the vast estate, the staff, the upkeep, the taxes, was crushing. At the urging of the city of Asheville, which desperately needed tourism dollars, Cornelia and John made a fateful decision. They would open Biltmore to the public. On March 15, 1930, paying guests toured Biltmore House for the first time. Admission was $2. It was a radical step. The Vanderbilts were opening their private home to strangers. Tourists walked through the bedrooms, the library, the dining room where presidents had dined. For Cornelia, it must have felt like a violation. Around 1932, something shifted. Cornelia began spending more time in New York City, claiming she wanted to study art. She left John to manage Biltmore alone. Then she moved to Paris. In 1934, Cornelia and John divorced. It was amicable by all accounts. The boys split their time between both parents. But what happened next shocked society. Cornelia dyed her hair bright pink. She changed her name to Nilcha, and she never returned to Biltmore. Not once. Not for her mother's funeral in 1958. Not for any family occasion. She simply vanished from American society, reinventing herself in Europe. How does someone walk away from the greatest private home in America? From a $50 million fortune? From the legacy her father had spent his life building? No one knows. Cornelia rarely spoke of Biltmore again. She married twice more, first to Captain Vivian Francis Bulkley Johnson, a British war veteran, then to William Robert Goodseer, a waiter she fell in love with during dinner in London. She changed her name to Mary. She lived quietly in Oxfordshire, in a village called Churchill. She kept her past a secret. When she died in 1976, at age 75, her ashes were placed in a church near her farm, the Mount, not in North Carolina, not with her parents. She had erased Biltmore from her life as completely as if it had never existed. Why? Some say she found life at the estate too dull, too constrained, too much a performance for tourists rather than a home. Others whispered darker theories that she was running from something, that there were secrets at Biltmore she couldn't face. Her sons inherited the estate. George took the profitable farmland and the Biltmore Farms Company. William took the house itself, the money-losing, maintenance-draining burden that was Biltmore House. And William Cecil, working tirelessly from the 1960s onward, transformed it into one of America's premier tourist destinations, welcoming over 1 million visitors per year. But Cornelia, she stayed away, a ghost herself, haunting the story of Biltmore by her very absence. Walk through Biltmore today and you'll discover that the house itself holds secrets, hidden doors, concealed passages, secret rooms woven through the mansion's 250 chambers. In the breakfast room, beneath a Renoir portrait titled "Child with an Orange," there's a doorknob. Most visitors don't notice it, but if you turn it, the painting swings open to reveal a hidden door leading to the butler's pantry. Servants would slip in and out, delivering meals without disturbing the diners. In the library, behind the wooden paneling and seamless bookcases, are 2 concealed entrances. One leads to the second-floor living hall, the other to a private den, a tiny room decorated with a carving of St. Peter the Martyr, patron saint of those seeking truth. George used this secret space for reading and quiet reflection. In the billiard room beside the fireplace, a wooden door is built into the wall. You can open it with the push of a button. It leads to the smoking room, where gentlemen would retire with brandy and cigars away from the ladies. In the winter garden, there's a trapdoor built into the marble floor. It was designed to bring potted plants up from the basement, without servants having to carry them through the public rooms. Early plans called for an elevator, but only a ladder was ever installed. Today, if you peer down through that trapdoor, you'll see it leads to an employee break room. In George Vanderbilt's own bedroom, there's a closet concealed in the wall behind his bed. The door blends seamlessly into the paneling, invisible unless you know where to look. Inside, an array of hats and accessories for every occasion, from formal dinners to camping expeditions. These weren't sinister secrets, they were practical design, ways to preserve the beauty of the rooms while allowing the estate to function smoothly. Ways for guests to move privately between spaces, ways for staff to work invisibly, maintaining the illusion of effortless luxury. But they also add to the mansion's mystique, the sense that Biltmore holds layers upon layers of hidden things, that behind every wall might be another secret, another passage, another room we haven't found yet. During World War II, the estate held different secrets. From 1942 to 1945, Biltmore closed to the public. The music room, which had never been completed, was used to store some of America's greatest art treasures, evacuated from the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., for safekeeping in case of attack. Raphael, Rembrandt, Anthony van Dyck, Gilbert Stuart's portrait of George Washington, 62 paintings and 17 sculptures hidden in the mountains of North Carolina. David Finley, director of the National Gallery, was a friend of Edith Vanderbilt. He trusted Biltmore to protect what the nation held most precious. After the war, the artworks returned to Washington, but the estate continued to struggle financially. By 1959, the entire property faced demolition. Then William Cecil, George's grandson, stepped in. He moved to Asheville in 1960 and dedicated his life to saving Biltmore. The house was losing $250,000 a year. The furnishings needed restoration. The infrastructure was crumbling. Cecil started small. He placed ads in local newspapers offering a free 19th century recipe from the Biltmore kitchens. The promotion became so popular he started charging a quarter. The quarters added up. By 1968, for the first time in years, Biltmore turned a tiny profit. Today, the estate welcomes over 1 million visitors annually. It generates approximately $50 million in revenue per year. It employs 2,400 people. The winery is the most visited winery in the United States. William A. V. Cecil died in October 2017. His wife, Mimi, died weeks later, but their children and grandchildren continue to run Biltmore as a family business, just as George Vanderbilt envisioned. Stand in the entrance hall of Biltmore today and look up at those soaring marble columns. Listen to the echo of your footsteps on the stone floor. It's impossible not to feel the weight of history in these rooms. George Vanderbilt, who dreamed of a castle in the mountains and died too young to see his dream endure. Edith, who spoke to his ghost for 44 years, keeping his memory alive through sheer force of will. Cornelia, who walked away from it all and never looked back. And the servants and staff, who, even now, report hearing phantom parties and whispered names and footsteps on empty stairs. Is Biltmore haunted? Perhaps the better question is, how could it not be? This is a house built on dreams and loss, on love that survived death, on wealth that couldn't buy happiness, on a daughter who chose obscurity over inheritance. It is America's largest home, a monument to the Gilded Age, a testament to one man's vision of beauty and stewardship. And it is a place where, some say, the past has never quite let go. In the library, if you're very quiet, you might hear a whisper, "George, George," a widow calling to her husband across the years, still waiting, still hoping, still refusing to say goodbye. And if you liked this video, please subscribe. It helps us keep these stories alive.